when the news broke that Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were found murdered inside their quiet Brentwood home, Hollywood didn't just pause. It went silent. This wasn't another celebrity tragedy. This was the shattering end of a man who shaped generations of film and friendship. And for Billy Crystal, this wasn't just loss. It was a haunting reckoning, because buried beneath the shock was a truth few knew. A private warning, a final conversation, and a moment he would relive forever. 2 days after the tragedy, as close friends gathered to release a joint statement, Billy Crystal spoke a sentence that stunned everyone who heard it. Short, heavy, final. He said, "He didn't listen to my warning." Those words were not spoken for drama. They came from a place of deep personal pain, rooted in a private conversation that Billy would replay endlessly in his mind. That conversation took place just 14 days before everything fell apart. According to Billy's later account shared quietly with trusted reporters, it happened on Sunday, November 30th, 2025, inside Rob Reiner's home on South Chadbourne Avenue in Brentwood. It began with a phone call that felt different from the start. Rob had asked Billy to come over, making it clear this was not about work, not about movies, but something far more serious. When Billy arrived shortly after 4 in the afternoon, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Rob Reiner, usually sharp, composed, and warm, looked worn down. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was uncombed. His handshake felt weak. Inside the living room, there was no television playing, no music filling the space, none of the familiar comfort Billy had known for decades. Rob poured water into a glass, set it down, and never took a sip. His eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, as if he was listening for something that wasn't there. After a long silence, Rob finally spoke. His voice was lower than usual, rough with exhaustion. He admitted that things at home had become overwhelming. He said he hadn't told anyone, but he was truly exhausted. When Billy asked what was happening, Rob didn't hesitate. He spoke about his son, Nick Reiner. Rob explained that Nicholas Reiner, born in 1993, had suffered a serious relapse earlier in November. Since then, his behavior had changed dramatically. He had become irritable, volatile, and unpredictable. Minor comments turned into explosive reactions. There were nights so tense that Michelle would leave the bedroom just to avoid confrontation. Rob admitted that the atmosphere inside the house sometimes felt frighteningly quiet after these episodes. He described a specific argument that had taken place just before Thanksgiving, a fight in the kitchen, triggered by money and treatment issues. Rob didn't repeat the words exchanged, but he admitted the moment gave him chills. For the first time, he realized he could no longer predict how his son would react. As he spoke, Rob rubbed his forehead and stared at the floor, not in anger, but in deep emotional fatigue. Rob told Billy that he was trying to keep Nick close, believing that family support might help stabilize him. Then he said a sentence that would haunt Billy forever. He said he was afraid that if he pushed his son away, he would be the one who caused Nick to completely fall apart. He spoke slowly, almost as if he were convincing himself. His fingers were tightly interlaced, his body tense, holding back emotions he could no longer control. It was at that moment that Billy Crystal did something rare. He stopped listening quietly and spoke firmly. He warned Rob that love should never come at the cost of safety. He told him that the behavior he was describing was dangerous, especially inside the family home. Billy urged Rob to set boundaries, not just for himself, but for Michelle as well. Rob listened without interrupting. His eyes were red when he finally replied. He said he understood the concern, but he could not see his own son as a threat. He explained that Nick had survived many dark periods before, and he feared that one wrong move at the wrong time could push everything beyond control. As he said this, Rob leaned back and let out a deep sigh, as if he himself was no longer certain he was making the right choice. The conversation ended with a heavy silence. Rob walked toward the window and looked out at the backyard, a place once filled with laughter and gatherings. He gently patted Billy on the shoulder and said he would rethink everything after Thanksgiving. Billy left the house as dusk settled over Brentwood, carrying a feeling he couldn't shake. For the first time in decades, he felt something was deeply wrong. When the tragedy occurred on December 14, 2025, Billy immediately felt that the details didn't align with the Rob Reiner he knew. The house had remained silent for hours before anyone noticed something was wrong. Rob and Michelle lived structured lives with routines and appointments. That prolonged silence felt unnatural, disturbingly so. When the scene was finally discovered, Romy Reiner entered the house first. She saw her father and panicked, running back outside almost immediately. Michelle Singer Reiner was found in a different location. They were not together. To Billy, that detail mirrored something Rob had once said, that tensions inside the house didn't erupt in one place, but moved from room to room, escalating in stages. What troubled Billy even more was the condition of the house. There were no signs of forced entry. Furniture wasn't overturned. Everything looked familiar, personal, untouched. To him, it didn't feel like an external intrusion. It felt intimate, domestic, like something that unfolded in the middle of ordinary life. Then came the most unsettling detail of all. Nick Reiner was not in the house. Billy's mind immediately returned to that afternoon in Brentwood, to Rob's confession that he could no longer predict his son's behavior. Over the years, Rob had spoken to Billy about Nick's struggles with addiction, the failed treatment attempts, and the long periods when Nick vanished from family life. When Billy learned that Nick was absent when the bodies were discovered, the warning he had once given suddenly echoed louder than ever. Adding to the unease was what had happened just hours earlier. At a Christmas gathering hosted by Conan O'Brien, Nick reportedly had a heated argument with Rob. Several attendees later said Nick appeared mentally unstable and erratic, behaving in ways that stood out even more than usual. Hearing this made Billy feel chilled because it matched exactly what Rob had described weeks earlier. Later that same day, Nick was detained near the University of Southern California, more than 20 kilometers away from the family home in Brentwood. To Billy, that distance mattered. It fit the pattern Rob had described: panic, disorientation, and flight after moments of crisis. Nick is now facing 2 counts of first-degree murder, with special circumstances involving multiple victims. He is being held without bail and is awaiting further court proceedings in early 2026. When Billy saw images of Nick appearing in court in detention clothing, his hands restrained, he felt physically shaken. It felt like watching the collapse of everything Rob had hoped to save. What hurt Billy the most was knowing that Rob Reiner had tried desperately to protect his son. The film, Being Charlie, was not just a project. It was a final attempt to guide Nick toward stability. Watching that hope dissolve left Billy feeling helpless and broken. In the weeks that followed, Billy withdrew from public life. He stopped showing up at familiar restaurants. He declined television appearances. He stayed inside his home for days at a time. Once, he quietly drove to Brentwood, then returned without speaking to anyone. Friends said he replayed his final conversation with Rob again and again. Every look, every pause, every word. "I thought I still had time," Billy reportedly said in private. "I was wrong." The guilt consumed him. Not anger toward Rob, not blame toward anyone else. Only anger at himself for being a listener instead of being firm enough to force action. He blamed himself for leaving that house, believing Rob would manage on his own. Eventually, Billy chose to speak publicly, not alone, but alongside those who had shared decades with Rob. A joint statement was released through the Associated Press, signed by Janice Crystal, Albert Brooks, Martin Short, Larry David, Mark Shaman, Barry Levinson, and other longtime collaborators. They remembered Rob Reiner not just as a director, but as a master storyteller, someone who valued collaboration, kindness, and creative trust. They recalled their bond that began in the mid-1970s on All in the Family, long before fame reshaped their lives. They honored When Harry Met Sally, not just as a film, but as a symbol of deep friendship and creative freedom. They also remembered Rob and Michelle Singer Reiner as a couple, united in life, creativity, and social causes. Losing them both made the grief even heavier. In the closing lines, the statement quoted, "It's a wonderful life," a film Rob deeply loved, reminding the world that one life touches many others, and when it's gone, it leaves an enormous emptiness behind. For Billy Crystal, speaking out was never about finding peace. It was about honoring the truth. Behind the laughter, the iconic films, and the public tributes lies a painful story of love, warning, and regret. Some signs appear early, yet go unanswered. As this chapter closes, the question still lingers. Was this tragedy inevitable, or could it have been stopped? Thanks for watching.